An unexpected arrival. In the distant reaches of the Andromeda expanse, the war between humanity and the All-Aran, a race of bioluminescent, silken-skinned aliens, had finally come to an end. Though the treaty had forced the All-Aran into a subservient role, there were still some who refused to submit to human rule. One such All-Aran was Lenera, a proud and defiant soldier who had been sentenced to a punishment known as bonding servitude, a symbolic and legal submission to a human master. As she was transported to her new home on the edge of the human colonies, Lenera's silver eyes burned with a mix of rage and resignation. She had vowed never to bow to the humans, yet here she was, shackled and at their mercy. Darren Cade, a quiet engineer tasked with maintaining the human outposts in the vast void, was caught off guard when a military drop ship unexpectedly landed on his homestead. He stood there, bewildered, as the soldiers escorted a defiant All-Aran woman onto his property, her bioluminescent tattoos glowing in the dim light. "This is Lenera, a war criminal," the soldier said with a sneer. "She's your problem now, Cade." Darren was appalled. "I didn't ask for this. It's not optional, orders from command. She's yours. Use her, train her, or just keep her locked up. Don't care as long as she doesn't stir trouble." Lenera's piercing glare met Darren's gaze, and her words rang with unwavering conviction. "I will never bow to you, human." As the soldiers departed, leaving Lenera shackled and alone, Darren found himself in an uneasy coexistence with his new tenant. The next few weeks were tense, as Lenera refused to speak and made her disdain for humanity evident in every step she took. Darren, in turn, treated her with a detached pragmatism, giving her a room, food, and space to breathe, for he had no desire for a slave. "I didn't ask for this," he told her one evening over a silent meal. "This entire arrangement feels wrong." Lenera's silver eyes narrowed, her crystalline hair shimmering like a nebula. She remained silent, but the defiant set of her jaw and the tension in her posture spoke volumes. Darren sighed, wondering how he would navigate this delicate situation. He had no experience dealing with All-Aran, let alone a bonded servant, and the weight of the responsibility weighed heavily on him. As he retired for the night, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease about the days to come. Little did he know that this unexpected arrival would set in motion a chain of events that would forever change both their lives. Exploring the divide. The uneasy coexistence between Darren and Lenera continued, with both parties keeping a wary distance from one another. Darren made every effort to provide Lenera with the basic necessities and a modicum of privacy, but he could not ignore the underlying tension that permeated their interactions. As the days passed, Darren found himself increasingly curious about Lenera and her people. He had heard stories of the All-Aran, their advanced technology, and their deep connection to the crystal-rich worlds they called home, but he had never before encountered one in person. Lenera's ethereal beauty and the way she carried herself with a regal grace only served to pique his interest further. One day, as Darren was tending to the maintenance of his outpost, he noticed Lenera standing outside, her face upturned towards the stars. He approached her cautiously, unsure of how she might react to his presence. "The stars are beautiful tonight," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if not to startle her. Lenera turned to face him, her silver eyes gleaming with a hint of surprise. "They are," she acknowledged, her words clipped and guarded. Darren hesitated for a moment, then took a tentative step closer. "I've never seen an All-Aran up close before. Your people are fascinating." Lenera's brow furrowed, and she regarded him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Fascinating," she echoed, her tone laced with a subtle edge of disdain. "I mean, the way you're connected to the crystal-rich worlds, the bioluminescence, Darren paused, realizing he was treading into delicate territory. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be intrusive. It's just, I've never had the chance to learn about your culture before." Lenera studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Darren's surprise, she spoke again. "The crystals are the lifeblood of our worlds. They sustain us, connect us to the very fabric of the universe. Our bioluminescence is a reflection of that bond. Darren listened, enthralled, as Lenera began to share snippets of her people's history and beliefs. Her words were guarded at first, but as she spoke, a hint of passion crept into her voice, and Darren found himself increasingly captivated by her narrative. As the conversation drew to a close, Lenera's expression grew pensive. "You humans have much to learn about the All-Erin," she said, her tone tinged with a subtle sadness. "We are far more than just curiosities or servants to be bound and tamed." Darren felt a pang of remorse at her words, realizing the depth of the divide that separated their two cultures. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to offend you." Lenera gave him a measured look, then turned and walked back towards the modest quarters Darren had provided for her. Darren watched her go, his heart heavy with the weight of the gulf that lay between them. As the days passed, Darren found himself drawn to Lenera's quiet strength and resilience. He continued to make tentative efforts to engage her in conversation, slowly chipping away at the wall of mistrust and resentment that separated them. Lenera, for her part, remained guarded, but Darren could sense a subtle shift in her demeanor, a glimmer of cautious openness that had not been there before. Bridging the divide. As the weeks turned into months, Darren and Lenera's fragile coexistence evolved into something more akin to a tentative partnership. Darren had made it clear that he had no desire to be Lenera's master, and she, in turn, had begrudgingly accepted the reality of her situation. One day, as Darren was making his rounds, he came across Lenera studying the intricate mechanisms of the outpost's power grid. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, and her fingers danced across the controls with a grace and precision that Darren found himself admiring. "You seem to have a knack for this," he remarked, unable to hide the hint of surprise in his voice. Lenera glanced up, her silver eyes meeting his gaze. "I spent many cycles maintaining the crystal power networks on my homeworld," she explained, a trace of pride in her tone. Darren nodded, his curiosity piqued. "Would you mind showing me how it's done?" he asked, hoping to bridge the gap between them further. To his delight, Lenera seemed receptive to the idea. She proceeded to guide him through the intricacies of the power grid, her nimble fingers expertly adjusting the various components. Darren listened attentively, his respect for her knowledge and skills growing with every passing moment. As they worked together, Darren couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in Lenera's demeanor. Her initial hostility had softened, and there were moments when she seemed almost comfortable in his presence. He found himself drawn to the way her bioluminescent tattoos danced with the ebb and flow of her movements, the way her crystalline hair caught the light, and the way her silver eyes would occasionally flicker with a hint of curiosity. One evening, as they sat together over a simple meal, Darren mustered the courage to ask Lenera about her life before the war. To his surprise, she responded with a hesitant yet open-hearted account of her childhood on the crystal-rich worlds, the close-knit communities of her people, and the deep connection they shared with the land and the stars. Darren listened, enthralled, as Lenera spoke of the intricate rituals, the ancient traditions, and the profound spiritual beliefs that shaped her culture. He found himself captivated by the vivid imagery she painted with her words, and he began to understand the depth of the loss and displacement she must have felt after being wrenched from her home. As the conversation drew to a close, Lenera's eyes met Darren's, and for the first time, there was no trace of hostility or resentment. Instead, there was a glimmer of something akin to understanding, a subtle acknowledgement of the bridges they had begun to build between them. In the days that followed, Darren and Lenera continued to work side by side, their interactions marked by a growing sense of mutual respect and trust. Lenera shared more of her knowledge and insights, and Darren listened with rapt attention, eager to learn and understand. As their bond deepened, Darren found himself increasingly drawn to Lenera's strength, her resilience, and the quiet grace that seemed to emanate from her very being. And somewhere along the way, he realized that the divide between them was no longer as insurmountable as it had once seemed. A blossoming connection. As the months passed, the relationship between Darren and Lenera continued to evolve, gradually transforming from a reluctant coexistence into a genuine, if still fragile, connection. Darren marveled at Lanera's intellect and her deep understanding of the intricate systems that powered the human outposts. He often found himself seeking her counsel, and she, in turn, began to share her insights freely, no longer guarded or suspicious of his motives. One day, as they worked side by side on a particularly complex calibration, Lanera paused and turned to Darren, her silver eyes reflecting a hint of vulnerability. "Why do you treat me this way?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm your bonded servant, yet you have never once demanded my obedience or submission." Darren felt a pang of emotion in his chest as he met her gaze. "Because I don't believe in enslaving others, Lanera," he replied, his own voice tinged with a mixture of empathy and regret. "What was done to you and your people, it's wrong. I won't be a part of it." Lanera studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Darren's surprise, the ghost of a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "You are different from the others," she murmured, and in that moment, Darren saw a glimmer of the pride and strength that had always burned within her. As they continued to work together, Darren found himself increasingly drawn to Lanera's quiet strength and resilience. He marveled at the way she navigated the challenges of her new circumstances, her defiant spirit never truly broken, even in the face of adversity. And somewhere along the way, Darren realized that his feelings for Lanera had evolved beyond mere curiosity or respect. He found himself captivated by the way the bioluminescent tattoos danced across her skin, the way her crystalline hair caught the light, and the way her silver eyes would lock onto his, piercing through the layers of his own carefully constructed defenses. One evening, as they sat together under the vast expanse of the Andromeda stars, Lanera turned to Darren, her expression pensive. "I am grateful for the kindness you have shown me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have treated me with a respect that I did not expect from a human." Darren felt his heart skip a beat, and he reached out hesitantly to touch her hand. "Lanera, I care for you. More than I ever thought possible." Lanera's eyes widened, and for a moment, Darren feared he had overstepped. But then, slowly, she turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his, her touch sending a shiver down his spine. "And I have come to care for you as well, Darren," she murmured, her gaze meeting his with a soft intensity that left him breathless. In that moment, the divide between them seemed to melt away, and Darren knew that their lives had become inextricably entwined, a bond forged not through duty or coercion, but through the gentle weaving of understanding, respect, and the beginnings of something far deeper. A future unwritten. As the months turned into years, the bond between Darren and Lanera deepened, transcending the boundaries of their vastly different cultures and backgrounds. What had once been an uneasy coexistence had blossomed into a profound and abiding connection, one that neither of them could have anticipated. Lanera's initial hostility and resentment had given way to a newfound sense of purpose and belonging. Darren had not only respected her autonomy but had actively sought to learn from her, to understand the rich tapestry of All-Aran culture and beliefs. In turn, Lanera had opened herself up, sharing her knowledge and insights, and forging a deep respect for the human engineer who had treated her with such unexpected kindness. As they worked side by side, their partnership grew ever stronger, their combined skills and expertise elevating the human outpost to new levels of efficiency and innovation. Darren marveled at Lanera's technical prowess, the way her nimble fingers danced across the controls with a grace and precision that he could only aspire to. And Lanera, in turn, found herself captivated by Darren's unwavering dedication, his quiet determination, and the way his gentle, thoughtful nature had slowly but surely chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. One evening, as they sat together under the Andromeda stars, Lanera turned to Darren, her silver eyes shimmering with a mixture of emotions. "I never thought I would find a home here, among the humans," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "And yet, with you, I have discovered a sense of belonging that I never knew was possible." Darren reached out and gently took her hand, his heart swelling with a profound sense of affection. "Lanera, you have become a part of my life in a way I never could have imagined. I cherish every moment we've shared, every bridge we've built between our worlds." Lanera's fingers tightened around his, and she leaned in, her crystalline hair spilling across his shoulder. "I have found something here that I never thought I would have again, a connection, a purpose, a—" She paused, her eyes searching his. "A future." Darren's breath caught in his throat, and he pulled Lanera into a gentle embrace, his heart overflowing with a profound sense of wonder and joy. In that moment, the divide between them had been bridged, not by force or coercion, but by the steady, unwavering growth of understanding, respect, and the most precious of all human emotions, love. As they held each other under the vast expanse of the Andromeda stars, Darren and Lanera knew that their journey was far from over. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and obstacles, both personal and societal. But in each other, they had found a steadfast companion, a partner to face the unknown with courage and hope. For in the end, their story was not one of slavery or subjugation, but of the transformative power of connection, the ability to bridge the divide between cultures, and the boundless potential that lies in the human heart when it is open to the possibility of love.